Very Thank you very much for that reminder. That is a great reminder. This meeting is being recorded. So if you miss something, or if you want to share this with friends, your company, maybe a board that you're on, an organization, do share this. We have today the top experts in cyber security, and they are really excited about imparting a bunch of words of wisdom for you. We love the Toolkit series. This is something new we started during COVID to give our area businesses top tips and tools to help their business success. So cybersecurity, this topic came out of a city meeting that we had with area leaders. And they said, honestly, right now, this is the #1 issue for their business. And so we thought we'd put together the top experts in the region, each from a different perspective. There might be some overlap in content, but that's okay. You know, sometimes it takes the brain several times to hear something before it sinks in. So that's okay if we're a little bit repetitive on some of these issues, but we can't drill these enough that this is super important for our area businesses to be protected and safe and secure. So take this to heart. Again, we're going to be recording this. We ask everybody mute yourselves. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. So think about those questions you want to put in our chat box. We are so happy today that Paul Schut is going to be our moderator. He's a technology advisor at Marco, and Paul is an executive board member of the West Des Moines Chamber of Commerce and helps us in a lot of ways. So we're really pleased to see Paul helping us with moderating this event. Plus, there's going to be so many acronyms and techie things flying around that, yeah, so I'm glad we have an expert here helping us navigate this great topic. So I'm excited to introduce the Chamber team of champions. Bailey First is running our show today. Thank you, Bailey, for all the work you do for all of our events. Really appreciate it. Kara Matheson is our Director of Workforce. Kara has a brand new event coming up on September 1. Nominate yourself or your company for the DEI Workplace Excellence Awards. Go to our homepage to find out more. Those nominations end at the end of this month. We are recognizing lots of people. So that's going to be amazing. Nicole Langmaid handles our operations. We have Tom Florian is our Director of Membership and Growth. And Anna Dowd is Director of Membership and Strategic Partnerships. So thank you to our amazing Chamber team. So I want to now introduce our amazing Anna Dowd, who's going to introduce our sponsor today. Thank you, Security National Bank, for sponsoring this amazing event. Take it away, Anna.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Catherine. And thank you to everyone who is joining us today. And an extra big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Security National Bank. They have been, I think this is their second year supporting this program. And we're just so thrilled to have them as our supporter. So thank you to the entire team over there. And with that, I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to Ray Meister.
Thank you, Anna, and Catherine, thank you, and to all your excellent chamber staff, not only for this hot topic today, if you will, but also thank you for allowing Security National Bank to be a sponsor of this excellent series of presentations. There couldn't be a better way to get this information across, especially when you started this series last year during the impact of COVID and the pandemic. And I will just say on behalf of Security National Bank, thank you for allowing us to be a sponsor of the program, because we feel it's not only a great program, but the topics are very time sensitive and very much helpful for all of us that are in business. Security National Bank is a $1.1 billion banking organization that is actually headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska. We have 12 locations, one of the newest of which happens to be the facility that I reside in on South Jordan Creek Parkway in West Des Moines. We pride ourselves as a bank as being a full-service, community-minded, consumer-oriented banking organization We deal in what we call our big four: our private banking business, our business banking business, our wealth management business, and last but not least, our trust and services business. And you know, you talk about wealth management and trust services as we all head towards every day, get a day closer to our retirement. Managing assets is a very key part of our banking organization. And today we have north of $1.5 billion of assets under management through our wealth management and our trust services arena. And we're very proud of that service. I also want to thank Paul for being the moderator today. You know, in the banking industry, cybersecurity, cyber attacks, protection of personal information is top notch for all of us. And as you all may imagine, we get various attempts at attacks every minute of every day, particularly when we deal with all of the personal information that we're fortunate to have as it relates to dealing with our clients. So Paul, thank you again for moderating this. Thank you to all the expert panelists that are going to be part of the group. I know as a bank president, I'm looking not only forward to learning some additional information, we feel like we get inundated with it, but as Catherine so well pointed out, maybe hearing it 2 or 3 times helps it sink in just a little bit. I will share that information with the management team and the rest of the staff on our team as it relates to what we learned today, and looking forward to today's presentation. Again, thank you from Security National Bank, and let's get on with the show.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for supporting this event and all your very kind words. We really appreciate your support for the chamber and all that you do for our community. And Ray and his team helped so many small businesses during the pandemic, working, you know, burning the midnight oil, right? Going to bed at 4 in the morning. And so thank you for all that you've done to help our community during these very, very interesting times we're in, for sure. Well, I'm excited to turn the baton over to Paul Schut, a technology advisor with Marco. Paul is going to help us lead the way. Everybody take their pens out, get ready to take lots and lots of notes. And again, we will do a Q&A in the end, and looking forward to everybody's presentation. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And I had $1 for every time I was called Marco, I'd have $100. So no worries on that. And welcome everybody today. It truly is a pleasure to have you all on here. And I'm not going to wax eloquent. I know we've got 6 amazing experts, local experts here that are willing to share what's going on and what our businesses need to be doing locally. So that way we're staying as protected as we can. And so with that, I'm just going to move straight on into our first speaker today. He is the president and CEO of Netbringer Managed IT Solutions. And Frank Alampi, feel free to jump on in and share your 10 minutes of content. And also here real quick, if anybody does have any questions, please do put them in the chat, write them down, something like that. And then when everything's all said and done, we'll do around a Q&A. But go ahead, Frank.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Alampi, President and CEO of Netbringer. Netbringer has supported clients throughout the U.S. for over 18 years. We are a security-first managed service provider. Everything we do is from a security standpoint. We also provide a comprehensive compliance framework. Good security and compliance go hand in hand. Bottom line, we require our security fundamentals as a baseline for support. There's no such thing as half security. I've worked in the IT field for over 35 years. I am fluent in typo, so no need to edit those emails or text messages. I feel very fortunate and thankful to be here today with such a highly skilled group of people. Let's get to it. Share screen. Cybersecurity, a term we have come to love. Let's discuss how we can put processes into place to help prevent you from losing everything you've worked so hard to achieve in an instant, especially since it can be prevented. What is cybersecurity? It is the art of protecting systems, networks, and programs from digital attacks. It's the practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. Why do you need to be aware? We have grown into a symbiotic relationship with data and technology. Our future is dependent upon technology. The bad news, you cannot guarantee 100% protection from attacks. What you can do is make it as difficult as possible and understand how you're going to respond when you do get attacked. Don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Well, yes, it is. But there is good news. There are processes we can put into place to give us the greatest chance of completely fending off or minimizing the surface area of attack and reducing the lateral movement within networks. This will create a robust defensive system that puts you on the offensive. You need to actively hunt these bad actors throughout all levels of your environment, 24/7, 365. There's no such thing as too small anymore. With the advent of sophisticated automation tools, cyber criminals can now target thousands or tens of thousands of businesses at a time. It's no longer a question of if, but when. The dark web, it's where you can traverse both legally and illegally. Some people use it to hide from persecution, while others to maximize your criminal ring. Start dark web monitoring. Criminals make their living from buying and selling your data on the dark web. Start dark web monitoring now. Monitor your domains and even some individual email addresses, C levels, and the like. Confidential information is at risk. It's not just the value of the data, it's the cost of recovering your environment, closing the holes, and repairing your damaged reputation. So what do? Security and hackers have an inverse relationship. Every layer reduces the number of hackers able to penetrate your business. No such thing as too much security. What can you do today? Instead of providing a high level and overall cybersecurity measures, I want to dive into detailed items that you can implement immediately to protect your business. What can you do when you go back to work after this webinar? Passwords. It's a tough one, but it does have a simple solution. Use strong passwords, right? Well, maybe. There's been a lot of discussion about the use of strong passwords and their effects on employees and everyone in general. Current recommendations are 16 or more characters, complex, change on a regular basis. Truth be told, there are many negative impacts to harsh password requirements and can cause users to adopt insecure practices. Then what do? You have two options and you should use them both. First, enable MFA or 2FA, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication everywhere. What is it? It's a combination of 2 out of 3 things. Something you know, password, PIN, security question, something you have, your phone, credit card, a fob, or something you are, your fingerprint, your face, your voice. Then start using a password manager with MFA and SSO, which is single sign-on, where available. This is IAM, which is Identity Access Management, and it can be used for all your logins. Store all your passwords in a password manager, and those passwords can be long and complex since you won't have to remember them. You only need to remember one password to access your password manager, which will use MFA. This password can be long and complex, but easy for you to remember, like a passphrase, so you don't have to write it down. Do not save your passwords in your browsers. Do not sign into websites with Google or Facebook or LinkedIn accounts. Give each website its own account and credentials and save them in your password manager. The future of identity authentication is passwordless. Patching. Patches and updates for all devices is a must, even if it seems inconvenient. Unpatched systems are one of the easiest attack vectors for criminals to gain access to your networks. Firewalls. Replace any consumer-grade routers or firewalls in your office with modern, high-performance, next-gen firewalls with ATM, IPS, TLS inspection, zero-day sandboxing, and machine learning ransomware protection. And make sure they are configured correctly, please. Use layer 3 switches. Make use of zones and VLANs to segment your networks to reduce the risk of threat penetration and propagation. If using VPN connections, avoid using split DNS on your firewall so you can control all internet traffic through your office firewall. Implement a default deny or auto containment system. throughout your environment. Use a next-gen antivirus application. Use a IDT, an internal ITD, an internal threat detection system. Combine that with an MTR, a managed threat detection and response system. Access. Remove local admin access for all users on devices. This includes your IT staff, contractors, consultants, and yes, this includes C-level executives. Have dedicated admin and installer accounts that are only used when necessary by specific employees. Email protection. Ensure you have implemented some form of advanced email security and filtering platform. Spam is probably 75 to 90% of the point of entry for all malicious attacks. Backups. Revisit your backup solution. Do you have enough redundancy? Trick question, the answer is no, never. You can only have as much redundancy as is financially responsible. No such thing as too much redundancy. Understand your retention policy. Confirm your redundancy, local, cloud, offsite. Test your backups. Make sure they are actually working. Make sure they are all working. Test all of your backup types, local, cloud, and offsite. Compliance. Check your business insurance policy to confirm you have cyber insurance coverage. Then check with your IT provider to verify you are in compliance with your insurance plan. It's the only way to ensure maximum payout in the event of a breach. Assessments. What good is all the protection in the world if you can't confirm it's working? Schedule a network assessment, schedule a security assessment. These should be run on a continual basis, monthly, quarterly. Regular assessments can be eye-openers, especially with so much of the workforce working remotely. Assessments can provide that essential sanity check that we all need. Your number one security risk by far is people. And I don't just mean users falling victim to phishing or other scams, clicking on the wrong links, opening the wrong email, surfing the wrong sites. There are also employees who mean to do you harm. Insider threats are far too common and far too costly. You need to protect yourself from the inside as well. The right security system will allow you to see what's happening and pick up on anomalies. They will also provide granular insights into what is happening and what did happen. This brings us to training, the single most important thing you can do for a company. Train your employees, train yourself, start phishing training, start password training, start training on multiple forms of security, whether it's internet and social media safety, mobile security, physical security. Train on data protection, privacy, encryption, and make sure you are compliance training. Continually test your employees using phishing campaigns. It's a lot to think about, and it's not something that can be accomplished in one fell swoop. Assessments will help you understand your environment. They will show you where you are most vulnerable and give you a starting point. They will give you a clear view of what you are truly using and where improvements can be made. Use that information to build an action plan for your business. Put that plan into motion and know you are heading in the right direction. There's no such thing as set it and forget it when it comes to security. Your attackers don't only try once. This is not about the IT department or the IT company or all the tools and resources you are using to protect yourself. This is about your business and where you want to take your business. Technology is easy. Putting it to work for your individual business goals is what matters most. What can you do tomorrow? The same thing you did today. Continue your security processes and never stop training. Protecting your business is not something you do occasionally. Have fun with your employees. Turn training and testing into office games. Offer awards to employees or departments who had the least failed phishing tests over a quarter or annually. It's your business. Make it fun, make it secure. Thank you.
Awesome, Frank. Thank you so very much. Man, we could just close up our computers and go home. No, that excellent content. I mean, that's probably a fantastic foundation to lead us into the rest of our speakers here today. And I'm sure all of the speakers knew that we were going to be stepping on each other's toes in terms of content. And so again, repetition is the key to memory. And so thank you very much for providing that, that foundation for us. So moving on next, we've got the CEO of Dymin Systems, Mr. Scott Breitman. Go right ahead. And you're on mute, sir.
Right. There we go. That works better when I'm not muted. So thanks, guys. We'll go ahead and share the screen here. And I think a lot of us are going to say the same things, but yeah, I agree with you. I think reputation is going to help. So let me start by saying that I am not a security expert, but we do manage small businesses, IT infrastructure. So what I'm going to talk about really is what you can do in the SMB. I mean, what does a small business, medium-sized business really need to focus on? What are the top 10 areas that we see the biggest problems with? I mean, I agree. You can get very granular with this. You can spend your whole life on it if you want to. But obviously, maybe the first and foremost is a firewall. And I like to talk about things from a very rudimentary, basic standpoint. A lot of business owners don't even know what their firewall is. They know that they need one. They just don't know what it does. So think of it like the front door to your home, though. It's designed to let traffic in that you allow, like through your front door, and it's designed to keep the doors closed for traffic that you don't want to allow. It is important that your IT provider set this up right, and their firewalls come with many different features. They can come with threat management and ransomware protection and antivirus and a whole host of things, and there's ways to accomplish that, but you absolutely need a firewall. Patching and updating. One of the things we find a lot is that.
I'm sorry. I don't. Are you intending to share your screen right now? Because we aren't seeing anything.
Well, yeah. So that's what the test was, right?
Yep.
Let's try it
Not
again.
a problem.
Yeah.
Sorry to get you off your flow there.
Not a problem. Not a problem. How about now? Let's see if we got it.
There,
now?
we're getting there. And
No.
perfect.
Now?
All right. We see you now. Sorry about that, everyone.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I guess I'm the most technologically challenged also, right? So here we go. So what I was talking about was patching and updating. What we find a lot in small businesses is that patching just isn't being done. And I think that in many cases the provider thinks it's being done, but Windows Patch Management is terminally broken, meaning that the software that Microsoft uses to do their own patch management often doesn't work. And so without good reporting or without a different type of way of managing security patches, a lot of the small businesses aren't getting it done. It's also important that developers of your line of business applications may be behind in their patch releases. This is a common vector for ransomware and other attacks, is attacking software that you may be running. And it's hard to manage this. It's not like you can call up your software developer and ask them if they're behind in their patching. They're going to tell you no. But what is important is that you run line of business software, in my opinion, that is under development. There is a difference. Some line of business applications, when they're having features added, that means they're still in active development. But when they're just in maintenance mode where nothing new is being done, those are the ones to be cautious about. While they're still under support, they may not be secure code, if that makes sense, in the background. So it's important to think about those things as you're choosing line of business applications, or if you've been thinking about switching. It'd be something to consider. I'm in agreement with everybody on the panel, which I think is that ransomware will happen. It's probably at this point not a matter of if, it's probably a matter of when. And there's almost nothing that can be done to keep you safe from a focused attack. What you need to do instead is to make sure you just don't have low-hanging fruit. So one of the most important things a small business or medium-sized business can do is have a backup, and this seems really obvious, but one of the things that we see missed all the time is that the backup is not isolated from the standard network. So your servers get attacked, and then your backup gets attacked as well. And while you may have offsite backup, the real question isn't how can we get back up or if we can get back up. If you have a good backup, you will be able to restore your company. If you don't, but the more important question is how quickly can you do it? So if you have to restore from a cloud or a cloud backup, it could take you days to get to get the data, let alone get back up and running. So you still need on-premise backups, but they need to be isolated, and a good way to do that is through backup software like Veeam, where you can set different credentials for the backup so that even if you get attacked, your backup isn't attacked, if that makes sense. User elevation, we find this all the time. Executives or people who are impatient often will have elevated rights on their own computers, meaning that they can install software, they can update things if they want to, because a lot of times they find it annoying if Adobe Reader says, hey, I need an update, and they can't do it. I'm going to caution you against this. If you have elevated rights under your user account, you should absolutely not have them. This is the most common attack vector, is elevated rights for accounts that either are not used or for people that don't understand the power of their own elevation, if that makes sense. We often find domain admin accounts unused. You may have, for example, you may have a line of business application that requires those folks get into your servers and update or work on the line of business app, and they have a domain admin account. This is effectively God rights on your network, and that account is active. It needs to be disabled. We find this all the time, that there are many, many accounts that are domain admin, they're active, they haven't been used, and those are easily attacked, or more easily attacked, of course. And then the last thing is simple things like screen lockouts. You know, many people walk away from their computers with elevated rights. I mean, if you're in HR or in accounting, you have access to data that other people in the company shouldn't see. And if you walk away from your computer and it's 20 or 30 minutes before the screen locks out, someone could easily jiggle the mouse and see things that you wouldn't want them to see, and they can do things even inadvertently that could be a security risk to your business. So password protection and complexity. I think this is going to get touched on a lot, and I think we all agree that this is important. One thing we see all the time is passwords written down on sticky notes and pasted to monitors. You absolutely cannot do that. You cannot share passwords. You can't have generic user accounts. These are things we find in businesses all the time. Generic user account might be something like front desk or lab 1, and everybody signs in with the same user account. These are security risks. Shouldn't do that. 16-character passwords. If you can do it, this would be the best way to have a password. And then the 16-character password cannot be a word. So what we're told is that, and I don't have one of these honestly yet, but what we're told is that if you should have a 16-word paragraph and then maybe use the first letter of each word in order to create your special password. Other things, multi-factor authentication. We are all talking about this. We haven't mandated our clients go to multi-factor authentication, but we're kind of getting to that point. This is the most, user accounts again are the most common attack vector. If you can line up multi-factor authentication with everything that you use, it's the best policy. Microsoft has single sign-on, which is a method for you to sign on to line of business applications. A lot of your companies will have integration with Microsoft so that it is a multi-factor authentication, but it verifies with Microsoft that you are indeed the valid user or coming from a valid domain. Spam filtering and antivirus. Again, I think we would all think these things are no-brainers. Like, of course, I have to have antivirus, but what we find a lot is that people don't have managed antivirus. It's installed individually on computers and not managed by the server, not managed by management software, remote management software that your IT provider may use. We find that a lot, and if it's not managed, it can easily just not be there, and it needs to be. A lot of people don't know, too, that spam filtering can be increased or decreased. I mean, what you filter can be changed. I think a lot of people tolerate more spam than they should, but they just think, well, this is just the way it is. And the problem is that the more your employees are exposed to spam, the more exposure you have for risks or security, is because they may click on things that they shouldn't. And that goes right along with user training. And that's phishing training, suspicious request training. You know, we see a lot of requests to transfer money or to wire money, and these are common business practices. I think, you know, the only way to combat this is to have training with your staff to let them know that you'll never have a request from me to transfer or wire money somewhere. Yeah, these are really important. We find it all the time, and we had a business just 2 weeks ago that caught it within minutes of it actually processing. Somebody had thought they were supposed to transfer money and almost did. And then web content filtering. This is kind of a thing that people miss. A lot of times your firewall will do this stuff. It'll filter websites and bad scripts. Many people don't know that you can get a bad script or a bad command that is actually presented on a legitimate website. So it's important that your web content be filtered, that the web pages you were trying to view have protection on them before you see them. We recommend software as a service. That means that you buy the protection from another provider and then everything goes through them. Cisco Umbrella, SafeDNS, WebTitan, these are all brand names that that you can use or have your IT provider look into. This can also be done on the firewall, by the way, so that's just more questions for your IT folks. And that's about it. That's all I had. I wanted to touch on the basic things and let everybody know, what the most common attack vectors are for us. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much, Scott, for all the data, the information. And again, I think that going through some of these things and repeating them throughout the multiple different speakers is evident. And I know we see it all the time. So, all right, moving right along, we've got the Senior Manager of Risk Advisory Services at Eide Bailly, Bob Hickok. And you're on mute.
Technology is difficult. Can you see my screen just fine now?
Yep.
All righty. Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you today. There's definitely going to be some overlap in our topics for sure, but that's because there's a lot of routine things that are great needed to be done. So I'm the senior manager in our Des Moines office. I've been I've been an accountant for 32 years, and after about 5 years of accounting, I started doing IT security with the firm in 1994. So I've done just hundreds and hundreds of IT audits, security assessments, vulnerability assessments, pen tests, et cetera. Work a lot with the banking industry. A little bit about Eide Bailly very quickly. We're a top 25 CPA and consulting firm. Founded in 1917, over 40 offices in 14 states, and also an office in Mumbai, India that we opened last year. We're more than 2,500 employees. There's a listing there of some of the industries we serve. Again, I work a lot with financial institutions, but work with a lot of other industries also. Some of the services we offer are on the list there. Since we're all talking about cybersecurity today, I'll talk just a little bit about our cybersecurity consulting services. So we've been doing that out of our risk advisory department for a long time. Here in 2021, we're excited to say that we've expanded our services a bit, hired a new director of cybersecurity. He's in Denver, Colorado. That's Michael Nugier. And so he's expanding a lot of our offerings beyond what we've done for decades with our clients. Here on the cybersecurity landscape, there's just a lot of headlines that we hear about and talk about a lot, and that's why we're all here spending time together today. But I want to draw attention to the one with the blue font there. Just a couple of weeks ago, America's cyber threat level was increased. It was due a lot to Kaseya incident, and that's where our evil used Kaseya to do ransomware attacks, very widespread. And Microsoft's print nightmare was also a part of why that was elevated risk levels. So just never gives up. In IT security, it changes every day, but some days it changes faster than we can all take easily. A quick look at the agenda. I thought there would be a lot of overlap in the best practices we're all talking to you about today. I wanted to split it out a little bit and present maybe what management and the board should be addressing, and then what IT employees, IT management, and managed service provider, if you're using someone to help you manage your technology, what they should be addressing. So this comes from, again, a lot of years of working with banks. And so either things to address shortcomings there, or things that have been emphasized in financial institutions for decades. Really, they've got the money and the information that so many people want to steal. So they've been a rich target for a long time. And I've worked with well over 100 Iowa banks, and then we have bank clients across the US. So management and the board of directors, some things to emphasize. Really, we should be designing information security program. And so that's not necessarily a written policy, it might be, but your program as a whole takes all the components you're doing to manage and secure your technology, your data, your money, whatever all it is in your network and your business that's important to be kept private to you. Risk assessments are a big piece of that. So we can do different types of risk assessments: cybersecurity preparedness, ransomware preparedness, information security. But a great thing that sometimes not addressed or not well addressed is the end result of those risk assessments is to find out gaps. Where do we have higher risk than our management, our ownership wants to take on? So then really, I think it's an important thing for management to realize, take those assessments, take the results from them, and help close gaps wherever you've got greater risk than you want to take on. Policies and training, as has already been talked about, are a big part. We need to have policies that direct things and the board approves and they're well thought out. And then we need to train on those. Of those types of training, I might just emphasize incident response training. That's one thing that even the banks, having worked on it a lot, sometimes that's a difficult thing to do well or do often enough. But history has shown that companies that have done incident response training and planning and testing, if they do get hit with an information security event, they're as much as 40% could be decreasing their costs and their pain from that event. So compared to a company who hasn't done incident response planning. Cybersecurity testing is a very critical part of the equation here. That's something I've been doing for a long time, mostly with banks, but many other industries also. That's your vulnerability assessments, your pen tests, social engineering and phishing testing. And again, I think it's very important to emphasize that we need to take the results from those tests. We need to know that we're remediating whatever vulnerabilities or weaknesses were found, and that we're mitigating vulnerabilities that were identified. Management and the board and senior management should also address cyber insurance, depending on what industry or industries you're in. That could include breach expenses, so just the cost of cleaning up if you had a breach, buying LifeLock and all that sort of thing. And then cyber liability, if you have a business model that you could actually lose funds or funds of someone else's, then we may need some liability insurance related to cyber events. Lastly, for management, we need to make sure that you're receiving and reviewing security information from your IT managers. So in some companies, certainly the managers, owners, board may be involved in IT. In many others, they're not. So it's very important for the IT manager and the people working on it to have hands-on and have a lot of details. We also need to boil that up and report it to the board and senior management so that you know that those systems are staying in place, they're being tested, or they're being improved, or they're being developed, and that they're staying effective, putting that money that you invested into them to good work still. As far as technology and your people doing your technology and maybe a third-party managed service provider, we need to make sure that we've got layered security or defense in depth. This is really a 20, 30-year-old topic. I like to explain it like a jawbreaker versus an M&M. If I've got many layers, how far in can that attacker get before I find they're there or before they crack their tooth? If I've got an M&M type situation, they've just got one layer of defense they need to get in. And if I don't catch them there, they're into the chocolate and the goodies. And we've got a big problem then. Vulnerability management, I like to emphasize that should be a continuous cycle. It's important to note that not all vulnerabilities are patchable. So we can patch some. Patch management is part of vulnerability management, but there are many vulnerabilities in a network that have to be changed through configuration changes and other things besides patches. So that should be a continuous cycle. Do everything you do on a daily basis to secure it, have your tests, and then mitigate the vulnerabilities that are found, and then go back to square one. It's important to log and monitor security events. Receive alerts on some items. You need to know right when they happen. And other events, it's good to maybe have a daily or a weekly report so that you can see trends. And if there's unauthorized activity going on, you may not be able to see it unless maybe you take a kind of a step back and look at trends of what's happening on your network. So that come from devices such as firewalls, virus and malware protection, intrusion prevention. And then the Windows security events are far too often overlooked. There's a lot that happens on a Windows network, and many of them I should know right when they happen. Others I should know again for trends that I might need my attention as a security team. Secure and monitor all remote access, as has already been spoken about. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, should be used. So here, since COVID started up, a lot of companies are using more remote access, either for the vendors or for the employees. And you should be able to regularly review that activity. Want to know who's coming into your network, when they came in, where they came in from, maybe how much data they moved in or out of the network. And then that should correspond to the activities that you expected your employees or your service providers to do for you on your network. Last there on that screen, manage and review Active Directory. So Active Directory is kind of the guts of a Windows network. In there, we should be managing the users and the groups, the security groups through which people get access, and then group policies. And those group policies will do things such as set your password length and password complexity requirements, or set your lockouts. So many things are done in group policy that we need to know what's happened there. And then one of our monitoring needs to be whenever a change is made in group policy, was that an authorized change? Technology inventories are also very important. We should be able to pull real-time inventories of the hardware and software we've got on our network. If we don't know all the devices and all the apps in use, we really would have a hard time of knowing how to secure them, who should be securing them, etc. That also helps if a new device comes on your network. You should know that it was an authorized device and not something that an attacker has spun up to do their bad work on your network. Segmenting the network is very, very important. That can stop many types of attacks. So segmenting the network would be every device on a modern network has an IP address. We can put those in different groupings or different subnets. So for example, you might want your workstations and your printers on one subnet, and your storage systems and your virtualized servers on another one, your routers, switches, and firewalls on another subnet. Separating that out can make it so an attacker can't just so easily traverse through everything inside your LAN or your WAN, your network. Don't allow admin privileges. That's already been spoken about. Almost all attacks start with some kind of phishing. If I'm the one who gets phished and I have admin privileges, it's kind of game over. I don't have a lot of defenses. I can only then hope that my monitoring will catch the unusual activity. One thing I think is a big bang for the buck that should be discussed or thought out is the implementing the CIS top 20 controls. This is a set of controls that can apply to any kinds of hardware, any kind of systems, any sort of business models. I call it a big bang for the buck because if you can implement as few as 5 of those controls, you would have the ability to block up to 85% of the known types of cyber attacks, no matter what name is on the attack, whatever kind of attack it is. If you can implement all 20 of those controls, you could block as much as 95% of the known attacks from being successful against your network. The next thing there, control and monitor managed service providers. So we've got some fine managed service providers here working with us today. They're helping you manage your networks, but the attackers have discovered over the last 2 to 3 years that that's just a rich target. If I can phish or otherwise break into someone who works at a managed service provider, then their job all day long is to go use admin rights on many other people's networks and help manage them. So actually, the FBI had that in 2020 as one of the highest, the second highest risk to financial institutions in the United States was what if something goes wrong at your MSP and they get breached? Then what do you have to stop that? So monitoring them and helping them know they're a target and therefore you're a target through them is an important measure. Lastly, warnings on notifications. Warnings or notifications on incoming emails that can help your users know when an incoming email is more likely to be legitimate or more likely not to be legitimate. So a lot of information there. I'd be glad to work with you, talk with you however we can today, or feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Awesome, Bob. Thank you so very much. Definitely some great repeats, but also some new add-ons. And I'm creating quite a little punch list here. So this is awesome. Thank you. All right. So moving right along here, our next speaker is the Director of Information Assurance Center with Iowa State University's Electrical and Computer Engineering, Mr. Doug Jacobson.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm director of our security efforts here at Iowa State, and my focus obviously is going to be a little more on the education side and not as much on the technology side of things. Let's see if we can get technology to work like everybody else has been having trouble. Not working? Are you seeing something? There we go. I want to talk just a little bit about some of the targets that they're after, and then I want to focus on how education, and that's been brought up by several of our presenters already. But if we look at what they're after, they tend to be after, I categorize it in 3 different categories. They tend to be after data systems, which there's a lot of discussion about that. That's where all our intellectual property, credit cards, personal identifiable information, production data, et cetera. That's where all the goodie is as far as digital data. We've seen more, especially in the ransomware side of things, going after the process systems. Billing, inventory, medical, payroll, those types of systems are if they can be taken offline, your business has a hard time coming back immediately, and that's gets the businesses to pay ransom. The Colonial Pipeline, JBS, and others. We fortunately have not seen a lot yet in the control systems side of things where they're controlling physical assets. And hopefully we're not going to see a lot of that. That's where they blow up pipelines. And there was a case in Florida where they were, due to bad credentials, they managed to get into a water treatment plant and adjust the chemicals into the water. But that was a case of bad password management, which has been brought up several times. So again, talk a little bit about how they do it, and this is very, very high level. But this has been brought up by many of our speakers. Lots of discussions about going after vulnerable systems, and we hear all sorts of systems with patch management, trying to keep them updated, using new technology. So we look at vulnerable systems. They can be vulnerable because there's something that was built wrong or configured wrong, but they can also be vulnerable because of something that people do. But if I look at protection, I really focus a lot on using technology to mitigate vulnerable systems. And there's been, as I said, lots of discussions about various types of technology. And we need to use all of those technologies that were discussed, whether you have them on premise or whether you use a managed service provider, managed security provider. Secondary to that is user-based mitigation. And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more in a few minutes. But you can have the best systems installed, and if your users do something like that Florida water plant, we had a simple password, allowed people in. There's no technology that can really help stop that. Turn around, and a lot of discussions so far have been around social engineering, the phishing, and try to transfer money, all of these things that are going on. It's kind of interesting. I've been in cybersecurity since the early 90s, and we've seen this shift from lots of focus on technology, and attackers were going after a lot of vulnerable systems, and they still are. But as we've gotten better technology, they still want in. So now they're going after the other vulnerable system, which is the human. So there we really focus a lot on education-based mitigation. We still have technology mitigation that lays on top of that, the anti spam types of things, the email viruses. All of those are technology that can support the mitigation of social engineering. But as has been mentioned, things like having a user with elevated privileges on their system. There you've created a vulnerable system. Social engineering can trick that user into installing malware, installing ransomware, et cetera. So we'll talk a little bit about, everything's about data. That's the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest thing any of you own is data. And we look at one way to classify data, and I'm not going to go through all these, other than the bottom two, but a lot of people have talked about data classification. That's a process and technology based. Classify your data into this is the data I absolutely positively can't lose. My entire world would collapse, all the way to data that I don't care about losing. Lots of discussions about compartmentalization. That is key. That's a technology solution for the most part, but that is key to keeping that lateral movement, to keeping that the person who accidentally installed ransomware on their computer, to keep that ransomware from propagating throughout the entire organization. And again, that's a lot of good technology around that. Cryptography, we talk about that all the time. Again, a technology type solution. The two I want to focus on a little bit more are contingency planning, which several people have brought up already, which is a process issue and an education issue, and then coaching, which is a pure education, mostly a pure education play. Several of our speakers have talked about this contingency planning. Assume you lose data. Assume it's going to be held for ransom. It'll be disclosed. It'll get erased. Whatever. Something's going to happen to your data. So, do you have a plan how to recover? Who do you call? What do you do? And that when you lose your data is not the time to figure this out. And so really we need to have a plan. And our last speaker talked a lot about that also, is this idea that we need to have a plan. What are we going to do internally? What are we going to do externally? And with this plan, have we practiced the plan? I'm a big believer in tabletop type exercises. Let's plan for what's going to happen. Run your C-suite through something bad happened. My network just got held for ransom. All my credit card data just got released to the public. Whatever the scenario is, what are you going to do? Who are you going to call? What are you going to put in place? How are you going to handle communications to the public? All of those things need to be practiced. And then, of course, backups is a big contingency plan. And then coaching. All of our speakers have brought up cybersecurity education. And there are some technologies out there that help support that. Some of the phishing, practice phishing, et cetera. But everybody needs to, it's a culture. Everybody needs to understand their role in cybersecurity. The data is important. What does it mean to be a good steward of that data? Again, they have a role in security. And we need to, my belief is we need to get away from top 10 lists, et cetera, in cybersecurity education. We need to put security and security literacy in context for the employee, for the people. And oftentimes that's putting it in context of their personal life. They may or may not, they're going to hold their data more important than they are your company's data. So if you really talk about helping them, enable them to protect themselves, there's going to, as the context, that hopefully is going to bleed over or move over into your company. And it needs to be made relevant to them. So in context is something they understand and relevant to their everyday life. And so we really need to, again, focus on being able to do this. And the last thing, and this is really kind of a call to action to some of our trusted providers, education, people in education, et cetera. We need to think about security education for all employees, actually for all citizens. I would look at organizations like banks and others to help with that education to all citizens, sort of like what we're doing right now. We need to, of course, produce more cyber workers. We need to put cybersecurity in context of other degrees, other majors. Cyber needs to start to become something that is integral to everything we do. Just like we have financial literacy, we understand money, financial processes, we need to understand cyber. We need to build a pipeline to get more people in there. One of the things that we're doing here in Iowa is we're standing up something called the Iowa Cyber Hub, which is a business education partnership to try to bring cyber education to everybody. So, thank you. And
Awesome, Doug.
figure out how to stop sharing here.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thank you very much for adding more Legos to the pile to sort through and to piece together. Moving right along, we have the cybersecurity manager from Marco Technologies, John Roberts.
Hey, hello everyone. Bear with me here. There was a question asked about kind of what incident response looks like. And so I kind of switched up my slides here last minute to account for that and to maybe address that question. But yeah, as Paul just said, I'm the cybersecurity manager here at Marco. My role is I oversee our security practice. So I say we do proactive security and reactive security. So obviously we like having conversations like this. We do security assessments. You know, we want to make sure we're taking care of our clients. In the event something goes wrong, you know, I think it was Frank said, it's not so much if, it's when an incident happens. We also do the incident response side of things too. So we can help navigate that situation for our clients. Because we do that, because we're kind of on both sides, we get a lot of information. We get a lot of insight into where organizations are falling down, either before or after an incident. So that's some of what I want to share with you today. And what I've got up on the screen here is kind of the way we look at security, or a lot of organizations, whether they put it in these terms or not, this is how they approach security. It's this right of boom mentality. So we have all of these technologies and these solutions that we implement in front of an incident, right? We want to protect ourselves and make sure it never happens. Kind of where the industry has been going the last couple of years is, all right, an incident did happen, now what, right? We actually did have an incident, we had a breach. What tools do I have in place to investigate that and to recover from it effectively and quickly? So a lot of the tools that have been talked about today, and of course I've got my own list here too, I'll share at the end, they're going to fall into probably one of these two categories, or maybe a gray area in the middle of, yeah, this can happen before and after an incident. But this is, again, a good mentality to take with you, and here's why. So if this looks familiar to you, this is the ransom note that Colonial Pipeline got when their network was ransomed. So I just want kind of everyone on the line to just pause for a moment and think, if this happened to you, let's say this webinar finishes, you go to log into your computer, you know, after a break or something, and this is what's up on your screen, and you can't do anything. You can't close out of it. You can't get any further. What do? You know, you probably pick up the phone and call your IT guy, but then what do they do? You know, this is an incident here, right? Something's happened. Do you have a plan? And that goes to, I think, again, everybody's pretty much touched on that, of having a plan and being prepared. So that's probably my number one takeaway from today. And again, it'll be on my last slide here of make sure you have a plan in place and prepare for events like this. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But being here and you know, having this great lineup and everyone talk about it is definitely a good first step. You're taking security seriously, and it's something you want to know more about. So I applaud you for that. So the question again was asked, what does incident response look like? Here's some costs that we saw at Marco in 2020. You know, don't get too hung up on the costs. These can vary quite a bit from incident to incident, but I like this because it breaks down the categories of what you're starting to think through during an incident. So you get ransomware, or maybe somebody got into your network. They got into, you know, an employee's email account, or like an HR account was used as an example earlier. What are the costs of an incident? Well, first of all, the very first step you should do in an incident, first of all, contain it, I guess. But after that, reach out to your insurance provider. So everyone has said, have an insurance policy. Reach out to your insurance provider. They're going to help guide you through next steps. They'll get an incident response firm involved. They'll get legal counsel involved. They'll get all the right parties involved for you, but you want to start there. Make sure you're working with the right parties that your insurance provider supports. But just look at all these costs that are associated with it, right? You've got your incident response firm. So I think it was Doug just brought up, you know, exfiltration of data or data leaving the network. That's a concern in pretty much every incident now. It's not just ransomware hitting your network and encrypting your data. The bad guys are also taking that data off your network. So if you don't pay the ransom, they can disclose it. You obviously don't want that to happen, and typically you need an investigation done to figure out what happened, right? Was data taken or not? So that's kind of what that incident response firm is cost is going to. The ransom itself, again, if it's a ransomware incident, these can often be negotiated down. Don't negotiate them yourselves, but it is something that you can work with the attackers to see if you can get a lower price there. Again, negotiation is something an incident response firm would help you with. Incident recovery services. So this would be probably most of the MSPs on the phone today. This would be people like us coming in and getting your systems back up and running after the investigation. Whether we're restoring servers from backup, whether we're just getting users back up and running, whatever we need to do, that's what this cost would cover. Recovery equipment, I want to touch on real briefly here. Not necessary in all incidents, but during an investigation, an incident response firm, that's their job. They want to do an investigation. They really don't care that you get up and running quickly, right? That's not their primary focus. Their primary focus is figuring out what happened. And typically we need to get some additional equipment in there or find some extra room on your servers to spin services back up so you can get working while the investigation is going on. Legal services, everyone thinks lawyers are super expensive, and they are, but as you can see here, their cost kind of pales in comparison to everything else you're going to be dealing with as you go through an incident. And then finally, downtime. So cost per downtime obviously varies, but this is a good, probably a good question to ask your CFO, right? Hey, if we're down for an hour or a day, how much is that actually costing the business? Because that can help guide you in what type of technologies or solutions or processes you should put in place to protect against this downtime. So I know that's a super quick rundown. I do want to get to the tools, but I could probably spend an hour on this slide alone. But I really wanted to kind of give you guys a frame of reference as what's all involved with an incident response. And this is the cost side of things. There's obviously the plan too that, again, Doug and Bob both talked about with making sure you have communications figured out. You know who you're telling, what you're telling your clients, what you're telling law enforcement if they're involved. Do you have to disclose it to the state? That kind of thing. So there's some of the driving force, I guess, that's behind all the technologies everyone's talking about today. That's kind of some of the reasons why we're talking about these. So here's my list of solutions, I guess. And solutions doesn't necessarily mean a technology, right? It can be people, it can be processes, or it could be a technology. So some of these might just be things that you need to implement within your organization. To kind of echo what, again, pretty much everyone has said, assess your environment, know your risks, and then go from there, right? Identify where you're at today, what matters to you as an organization, and then let's implement the right tools to protect against it. An endpoint detection and response solution and a SIM solution, two very different solutions. Just for brevity, I'm going to combine them real quick though. You can kind of think of this as, I like to use the analogy of a physical building. Your EDR solution, that's really the next level of antivirus. So it's protecting your endpoints, but that's like a security guard, protecting your building. If somebody tries to break in, the security guard's going to stop them, or maybe they're going to call the cops or something like that, right? They're going to take action and try to prevent somebody from getting into your network. A SIM solution, well, it's got some protective technologies. Usually it's more detective. It more aids that investigation. So I equate this to like security cameras in your environment. I think a lot of people probably have security cameras in their office building. A lot of people might have them at home anymore, but the idea isn't, hey, the security cameras are going to stop the bad guy, but they can help answer those questions of, hey, how did the bad guy get into our network? Did they take any data out of our network, or what else did they do when they were inside? That's what a SIM solution helps address. And I'm going to skip over the next two. Again, those were mostly touched on. Minimize administrative access. I guess I'll talk briefly about it. We do penetration tests. We see penetration tests, and having administrative access on endpoints is probably the #1 way attackers get into a network. They get access to an endpoint, and then they can escalate privileges from there or spread laterally through your network. Immutable backups, again, having backups in place, being testing that they work, and then being able to restore from them.
Oh, John. Oh, there we go. Can we hear you? I think you're on mute for the moment. All right. Well, I know we're at 9:30 on your time. I keep track of everybody here. So thanks for the info. I think maybe we kind of got cut off here a little short, but we're going to go ahead and keep moving because we got one more speaker here to wrap up before Q&A. John, thank you so much. That brought a different level of understanding to what we've been talking about here today in terms of what happens after the fact and what that cost could look like. So thank you, John, for going through that. If you can stop sharing your screen too when you get a moment.
Yep, sounds good. Sorry, my phone call dropped there for some reason. So
that's all right. 90% of the way there. So that was good. All right. So last but not least, we had to do it in alphabetical order, right? We couldn't put someone above the other. We just had to go to the alphabet. And Scott Williams with a W last name. I'm sure you've, been on the last of a lot of things growing up through grade school. But we've got the manager of technical operations over at Aureon, our last speaker here. Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Paul. Quick introduction about Aureon. We provide business services to our customers. That includes consulting services, call center services, and then a big focus is our technology services. Aureon's got a huge fiber optic network here in Iowa, so lots of communication-based services, but also IT managed services and complementary products. So I am the manager of our technical operations team, which is part of our client IT team. So we provide IT managed services and again, some of the communication services for our team. So specifically when it comes to cybersecurity, the team that manages our managed firewall products reports up through me, and the team that manages the system administrators for our managed services products, so that they manage the various controls we have, like antivirus, SIM, our EDR solutions, 2FA solutions. That team reports up through me as well. So a little about me: I've got over 3 decades in IT as a professional, and even more time as a hobbyist back when computer hobbyists maybe weren't so common. But my focus is, again, primarily been in the network arena and IT management. And my team here at Aureon, I would say we're on the front line of providing cybersecurity protections for our customers that use our IT services. So as a result, I've got a keen interest in cyber security issues and pay attention to the news. We've had some really, really high profile attacks that have happened recently. And of course, I like to dig in and look at the lessons we can learn from those. And it's kind of interesting, some of the ones we've seen lately. Perhaps you've heard of the SolarWinds incident in 2020 and rolling into the early part of this year. Or as previously mentioned by some of our other speakers, the Kaseya breach that happened just recently. And again, looking at the details, trying to see what lessons we can learn in a lot of respects. It's kind of nothing new under the sun, right? I mean, when you trace back those breaches and see, well, how did these things escalate to the point that they became such a big deal? The SolarWinds breach is, speculation is it was compromised passwords, right? That's how the bad guys originally got in, and then compromised certificates and other parts of the infrastructure, and were able to spend a whole lot of time in there that made that a really huge attack. But it was that simple thing we hear about and been talking about for years of protecting your credentials. Similar to the Kaseya thing, that's can be traced back to unpatched vulnerabilities in their software. In this one article recently from Brian Krebs, who's a favorite of mine in the cybersecurity press, some of these vulnerabilities date back to 2015, but they're making headlines today because they're being exploited. So again, in one respect, nothing new under the sun, but what's really interesting about these is the targets of these attacks. And what we're starting to see is that the threat actors are actually targeting the very tools that businesses are using to protect themselves and their customers. And so that's kind of the interesting change that we've seen in the last couple of years. And we've had lots of conversations from the other presenters about a layered defense and why that's important. And I think this type of attack that we're seeing is an example of why that's so important. What happens if the cybersecurity vendor that you chose to provide protection for your business is the next target of one of these types of supply chain attacks, right? So that's really, when we talk about a layered defense, it's a variety of controls that you're using to protect you, but in a lot of cases, it's redundant controls as well. So just a quick example, one of the controls that's been talked about by some of our speakers here this afternoon are antivirus protection, right? It's a simple control, something that's been around for a long time. Lots of people understand what it does, right? But just that one particular service, there's opportunities when you're protecting yourself in this defense in depth or layered defense strategy to have multiple solutions. So, you've got your primary protection. Let's say you're using Microsoft Office 365. So there's protections that Microsoft offers natively in their service. Do you have those protections in place to look for antiviruses and other types of malware, or to look for viruses and other types of malware in your email? In your cloud storage system, do you have their advanced threat protection features enabled, right? That's one layer of protection that you can layer on. Also, firewall protection. Firewalls can have built-in protection. This was, again, mentioned already for antivirus capability, right? Features on the firewall that are looking for malware. Do you have those features in place? Are they enabled and configured properly? Then you get down to the actual individual desktops. Do you have a next generation antivirus or an EDR solution or a managed detection and response solution in place? And this is where, when I'm talking about defense in depth, I start to talk about multiple services, right? There's complementary services that you can add on here. Multi-factor authentication can be used to help protect your email provider. DNS protection can help provide protection if the threats do get into your environment. That DNS protection can stop command and control traffic in some cases and really help to shut things down. Vulnerability scanning to detect what vulnerabilities might be able to be targeted by that malware. Advanced backups like we talked about. Some backups are even sophisticated enough that they can detect changes that might indicate a compromise of some type with the files that are being backed up. And all of these tools that you've got in place, are they monitored by a SIM so you're getting these notifications? But so those are different layers of protection that you can add on and stack up and provide protection. But also, again, looking at redundant services. When I look at the service that we provide for our managed service customers, just our premium service, these are some of the controls that it offers. Firewall's part of that product, SIM and SOC. DNS protection is part of that product, anti-malware. But we provide redundant layers of those services, and I think that's really important. We deal with multiple tools to provide antivirus protection, multiple tools to provide other types of threat protection. Now, the downside to all of these layers is it adds complexity, right? When we look at this product that we offer, we're talking about 16 different vendors with 26 some components and services. That complexity can be overwhelming, especially for a small business, right? And there's significant costs. You've got to have expertise in those systems. You've got to have just the acquisition costs and the upkeep on those things. And really that's where I think managed service providers can really help. Even though some of the tools that those managed providers have used have made the news as being under attack, there's still benefit to using those managed service providers to help protect your business, because they can vet these tools that can work together and complement one another. I mentioned the antivirus example. We run two separate antivirus and an EDR product in that solution. And a lot of vendors will say, well, that's redundant. You don't need both. But again, what happens if the primary one that you're relying on is the next target of an attack? But the thing you got to be careful about is, can those two tools work together and cooperate with one another, and also not adversely affect your performance and drag down your business with poor performance? So, that's the kind of expertise and assistance that working with a managed service provider like some of the companies that are represented on this panel today can really bring to the table, and help you to stay on top of these rapidly changing threats. Just very important. And I guess the last thing in that layered defense is, don't just, and this was mentioned earlier as well, monitor those service providers. And one way to do that is to use multiple providers, right? Find service providers that offer complementary services that can provide a double check for the services that you're getting from those providers, and can really increase the layering of defense. And that's really going to offer your best protection with the current threat landscape that we see today. So that's my advice. Let's figure out how to stop this presentation now.
Oh no, I didn't see the presentation, Scott.
Really? The whole time?
Yeah, no, you were flowing so naturally. I thought you were talking off the cuff. So
it's all right. It's not that important of a presentation. So
my apologies. Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right.
Well, we've got 13 minutes here before 1:30. We have had some questions starting to flow in. I do want to just take a second to thank all of the speakers that have gone through, shared their information with us today. One of the questions was, hey, can we get this information? Yes, I think Catherine had alluded, this will be on the Chamber's YouTube site that you can pause, rewind, listen and fast forward, however you want to listen to it over and over and over again. So please do feel free to take advantage of that to be able to take all of the extra notes. And I also want to encourage people as well. We don't have necessarily time to go through every question or go through every detail, but if there was something that resonated with you here today, please reach out to the Chamber office and say, hey, I really like what XYZ said. Can you help connect me with that person? And I'd like to learn more. I think I could speak for everybody here on the panel that we all represent companies that we want to make sure that businesses are doing what they can to protect themselves. And so whoever you connect with, just please make sure that you're doing what you can to ensure that you're doing the necessary steps to make sure that you're safe. So if there's someone that you would like to speak to in more depth, please reach out to Catherine and the team, and she can certainly help create a warm handoff from that regard. Real quick, we saw some questions come through here, and one of the things that really seemed to come up, not only as a question, but also as a point in almost every single one of the presentations, was regarding understanding your environment and assessments. Because if you don't know what is going on inside of your environment, how can you know how to fix it? If you don't know what's broke, you can't fix it. And so again, I think pretty much everybody on this panel does some type of an assessment. And so feel free to, again, reach out. You can reach out to every one of us and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about your assessment process. What does that look like? And Scott Williams, I want to also applaud you in terms of talking about multiple different vendors. And that was actually a question I did want to throw out here to the panel really quick. Whoever can unmute themselves first and start talking gets it. But can it help or hurt to work with different companies beyond understanding an environment, because in a way you're inviting somebody behind the curtain to see what's going on inside of your network. But are you doing a better job because you're getting different perceptions from different organizations, or can it hurt you in the fact that you are actually inviting more people into your network than you should? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Yeah, just to add on to what I was talking about in my presentation, I think it's important to work with multiple service providers that can offer complementary services. Like if you're providing patch management services, it's wise for a business to have somebody else in there to validate that company that's doing that work for you is doing a good job. I mean, we provide reports to our customers. We believe we do a really good job, but I would never suggest to a customer of mine that, oh, don't bring somebody else in here because that's a security risk. I want somebody to be validating that we are taking care of our customers' interests.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. All right. Another quick one, again, kind of following up on the incident response side of things. That was a question, and I know John talked quite a bit about that. I just want to open it up again. First step, like literally coming out of this meeting today here, if you do not have an incident response plan in place, what would you recommend that somebody do? Again, anybody can jump in. I know Bob talked a lot about that as well.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of good sources, whether it's something on the internet or someone to do consulting for you. There are many think tanks like SANS, CIS, NIST. There are just many proven technologies and proven methods about identifying it. And so it kind of has to be in context with your complexity of your networks and what your business is, what you're doing, how information comes in and goes out. So one of the many ideas I'm sure we have on that.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, Bob. And again, everyone on here, I'm sure, is more than willing to help you develop an incident response plan. The other thing I'd strongly recommend you do, though, is reach out to your insurance provider today. Understand what they will or won't do during an incident. Make sure you know what you have coverage for, and just set expectations. So, insurance providers, they might have a day turnaround, and you're probably not going to want to put up with that if your network is down, but just planning for it and being prepared for that, hey, it's going to take 4 hours for emergency check and then another 4 hours for a firm to get involved. Just set those expectations and know what parties will be involved.
Thank you. All right. One of the first questions that came up, and I know Frank kind of got the ball rolling, was regarding passwords. And the question was thrown out there regarding password managers. I know I've used a password manager for years. I can't imagine not using it because my memory is not that good. But I was curious to get people's feedback in terms of, is there a higher risk in using a password manager? Because all the keys to the kingdom are in that. And so can someone talk a little bit on that, just regarding password managers and any threat that there could be with using those, or threat level was one better than the other?
Yeah, so password managers are great, and they do use multi-factor authentication. So that protects you with the layer you need. And, it's going to work to where it's going to be passwordless anyways. There is always the threat of, oh, what if someone hacks that company? Or if that company was, I saw a question asked about if the hackers are making these companies, these password companies, can you trust them? Well, if it's open source, don't use it. There's some big names, Thycotic, MyGlue, CyberArk, Passly, Dashlane, 1Password, LastPass. There's a lot of really good ones out there. Some are better for more personal use and some are better for enterprise use. But a password manager is a great thing, but you have to consider other levels of security as well, because you might have your password manager and it's secure. And can it be hacked? Well, everything can be hacked, right? So it's hard to say, no one's ever going to get into my password manager, but it could. But the fact that you're using multi-factor authentication is great. The bigger problem is, you have your password manager, you're logged into it. What kind of policies do you have set for all your employees? Do you force their password manager, especially in the enterprise versions, to automatically log them out in their browser? So if someone else comes up to their computer, they're not logged into their password manager. And that comes into all the other types of security, where you use screen locks, where you force logouts, you put in timeframes. So it's not just one and done. You can't say, oh, I use a password manager, I'm safe. Well, you use a password manager, that's great, but there are different levels of security that you need to have in place to make sure that you're being safe and you're using safe practices. And that really is what it comes down to. You know, these complicated passwords and everything, that's exactly what you get. Sticky notes under the keyboard, or, oh, well, you're experienced, your sticky notes under the mouse pad where nobody's going to look. So, you know, it is the better of the two evils, using a password manager versus not, for sure.
Thank you, Frank. All right, so we got time for one more question. I saw it was going on in the chat right now, a good conversation regarding, you know, what happens if the world starts to really have incidences here. And I know, Doug, you were kind of chatting a little bit about that here. So can you take just a couple minutes quick in regards to cybersecurity threats in our community, banking systems, power grids, and just kind of touch on that a little bit in terms of, you know, what we could be doing personally to prepare ourselves if something like that does happen as well, or as a business.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was just mentioned, everything's potentially hackable. But as a list of things to worry about, I think worrying about those things going away are pretty low on the list. Lots of efforts are there to keep that going. I think we have a bigger fear, and this was borne out like last week when a section of the internet went out, and there's been times when regional areas of the internet have been out. That's been more of an infrastructure issue, sometimes not cyber related, sometimes cyber related. So I think it's more of the whole availability being gone when you talk about banking than it is potentially them taking and compromising the actual banking system. So if you look at a doomsday scenario, there's some pretty nasty scenarios that people paint. Here in the state of Iowa, there's a lot of effort. We run tabletops 2 or 3 times a year at a state level to play out those games of what if we lose power? What if we lose water? What if we lose banking from a cyber standpoint and other standpoints? So that's back to my comments about being prepared. And I think the average consumer just should be aware that there's a lot of very good people, a lot of people around this table and other places that are spending a lot of their time and effort to try to make sure the lights are on, the water flows, and we can get money out of the ATM, although people don't use cash anymore, do they? But however the new generation uses money.
Awesome, Doug. Thank you so much. And again, I just want to take a second. I want to applaud everybody here on the panel. You did an amazing job walking us through all of this great data today. And again, all of our attendees, the folks that have joined us, if you have additional questions, please reach out to the chamber. Any of the panelists would be happy to reconnect with you, have some more consulting and let you know what else is available here in the area. So with that, I want to pass the baton back over to the CEO of the West Des Moines Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Catherine Harrington.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. You did such a great job, and everybody, all of our panelists today did a wonderful job. And Doug, I want to highlight what's behind you. You have some computers there that it looks like a museum behind you. So much fun. I think I remember some of those. So that's pretty darn cool. A lot of those are going for a lot of money on the internet. So I wish I would have saved my my huge, desktops that I used to have and so on. So thank you so much, Paul. Thank you to Security National Bank, Ray Meister. Thank you for your support and everybody here. Again, this will be on YouTube. If you want to reach out to some of these folks, feel free to reach out to them personally or me, and I can get you connected. And just so privileged to have all these experts here with us today. I've learned so much, and we've already been kind of thinking about, okay, cybersecurity insurance. We got to start doing some things and protecting ourselves. So thank you. You've opened up my eyes, and I'm sure you've opened up a lot of people's eyes on this this webinar today. So wish everybody a happy and safe day, and test negative, but stay positive, everybody. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Great job.